Howdy, howdy, everyone. Chris here. Welcome to Garage Noise. On this episode, we're going to repair the rust on this Dodge 3500. It's got some rusty cab corners, and the rockers are completely destroyed. There's three sections to these rockers, an inner, a middle, and an outer section. All three are destroyed. We're going to replace all three of them, treat it. I'm going to show you exactly how we do it. So let's get it in the garage and make some noise. The first thing we want to do is to strip it down, remove the doors and the Nerf bars. So I've elected Deros to get the shower of rust, removing the Nerf bars, and these rockers are destroyed. But let's go ahead and take a look at the parts we have for this. These are the outer rockers. We've got both sides. We're going to replace both sides. And then this is the middle section here. We did not find the intersection for this truck in this year, but we did find one that was a little bit newer, but we've elected to make our own. Now we need to remove the outer skin, and Deros is finishing that up. He's just using a cutoff wheel. We're not doing a precise cut on this. We're just trimming out the rust so we can fit up the new rockers. We've made some basic cuts and removed that outer skin, and I'm just going to dolly this metal around so this rocker lays flat and we can get a true idea of where to position this and mark off so we can make our cuts. The rocker doesn't entirely cover the rusted area, so this piece right near this cab corner needs to be removed, so I'm grinding it down. It's got some pinholes in it, so we're going to cut and weld in a new piece of metal there. Okay, so now we have this rocker all fit up, and as you can see, the hole lines up good. It's all lined up with the top. We have a little bit of issue here. We're going to have to patch a piece of metal there, I think. So that's where we're at with this. I'm going to mark this, and then we'll do the rest of the trimming on it. But I think that's a good fit right there. Now I'm going to trim up just below where I made my marks. I'm going to leave myself about 1/4 of an inch room for error, just in case we need to make some adjustments when we fit up that middle and that inner section. Now, luckily, the inner section that meets up with the floor was not rusted all the way to the top, so I was able to use about 3 to 4 inches of that section, and we're going to weld that very intersection to that metal, that good metal. So now what we'll do is we'll clean up some of this rust. We're going to have a lot of cleanup on this rust, some sandblasting. As far as these welds of this middle section, I'm using the belt sander to cut those welds, and then what we'll do is we'll go around with a air hammer. Okay, to knock those loose. So there we have the center section all fitted in. Now, I did not remove this old piece. It's still in here. Okay, I'm just fitting it up and just trying to see where I want to cut this. I think I probably will. Probably not trim it up here, but I'm going to trim it here on this seam. Split that seam so this is up against the floor. So there's 1, 2, 3 pieces of metal here. Probably right here. Back here is where I have a concern. We're gonna have to add a piece of metal here, in here. So I need to treat that because this piece does not go up in here, okay? It just covers that area. Now we do have a cab corner, but this all needs to be treated. And this seems to be pretty solid. It just needs to be sandblasted and cleaned up real well. I fit up the center section and marked it off where I need to make my cuts. And now I'm going to use the belt sander to cut the welds and remove that metal. I have the inner part of this rocker cut and fitted up temporarily just to see where it's going to sit. We're going to have to make some adjustments and some more cuts, and we'll talk about that later. I really prefer to use the belt sander to grind these welds, and then I can come through with the spot weld separator or the air hammer and remove this piece of metal very easily. And if you're interested in any of these tools that I use, I'll leave the links in the description below. I also have my Amazon storefront. You can check there where I have all the tools and products organized so you can find them very easy.
The piece of metal I had is a little bit larger than what I need. So what I've done is I fit in the inner panel where I need it and positioned it where I need it. And I haven't put the center panel in, but I fit up the outer panel here, and you can see it fits really nicely. I may adjust it a little bit there because it needs to go up just a little bit before I mark this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this panel out to where it's going to meet up with this outer panel. So I'm going to bring the inner panel out to meet up this, and then I'm going to trace it, and then I'll be able to trim that piece out perfectly where it needs to be before I install it. So I just tack welded that inner panel in. I do need to put a piece of metal in here to replace that, so I'm going to weld a new piece of metal in here. This outer rocker did not come up high enough to cover the rust that was there. Of course, we have cab corners for it. Making progress, so I'm going to mark this and we'll trim this out.
Okay, so now we have this intersection of metal all trimmed and welded in solid, and then we went around the welds and we used automotive seam sealer to seal it off. We treated the metal before we did that and primed it, and then we'll do some more preparation on this panel before we put the middle section in. Okay, so now I've primed and painted that intersection of metal, and now we have the center section fitted up and tack welded in. We've cleaned up a lot of this metal, removed the rust, and we'll be treating it before I put the outer skin on. I'll need to plug weld this jam section where that middle piece of metal fits up, and then on the bottom we'll plug weld that as well for this middle section, and then we'll treat the middle section, get it painted up, and we'll be ready to put on the outer section. Okay, so now I want to fit up this rocker one last time, make sure everything fits properly, make any adjustments we need to make, and then I think what we're going to do is put on the doors, check those out, make sure everything closes and the gaps are good before we weld this in. Now we're going to go ahead and prepare this rocker to be welded in. I went ahead and drilled some holes on the top jam and the bottom so we can plug weld that, and then we're going to grind these holes right around these holes so we can get a good weld on it. Now we're ready to weld this rocker in. We've went ahead and we've treated the middle panel now. We still have some trimming to do on the bottom of that inner panel, but we've got it all painted and treated and ready to be buttoned up. I'm going to go ahead and fit up this cab corner. I'd use my step pliers to make a little step there so it lays flush against that panel, relatively flush, and we're going to weld it in, and then we'll hammer it down a little bit, and we'll use a little bit of filler around this cab and then in the jam on the posts. So I'm going to go ahead and tack weld this in, and then I'm going to go about every half an inch to an inch, put a weld on it, and then I'll come back through and fill it in. We don't want to weld it solid. We don't want to warp any of this metal. That could create a big problem. Okay, so it's coming along nicely. We have the outer rocker tack welded in. I went ahead and treated inside there. We sandblasted in there, and then we treated it and primered it. Everything lines up pretty well. We just have it tack welded in right now, but we're pretty much going to be butt welding these posts. Now there's a little bit of gap there. We're going to have to fill that in with some metal. We're going to have to weld underneath as well. There's a lot of plug welds we're going to have to do, and we have to trim that intersection of metal. It's hanging down just a little bit. We're going to trim that flush. Again, we're not going to weld this solid all at once. We want to tack weld it in. We want to put a weld, then move about an inch away, put another weld, and keep doing that. And then we'll come back and keep filling it in until it's one solid weld. We don't want to warp this metal. We don't want to warp this rocker. That's going to create a lot of body work for us. So We'll take our time, make sure we're not heating up this metal. The door fit up nicely, everything looks good, so it's time to weld this rocker in, get this job complete, and then I'll show you the finished product. So let's bump up the beats and get it done. I couldn't be happier with how these rockers turned out. They came out beautifully and they're going to be rust-free for years to come. If you appreciate this video and want to help support the channel, check out my links down in the description, or you can just like and comment on this video. I appreciate each and every one of you watching, and we'll see you next time on Garage Noise. To increase your knowledge, click on one of these videos now.